Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to Dialogue with Dianna. I'm Dianna Anderson. I'm the CEO of Cylient and the creator of our system for instilling in the moment coaching and feedback. This morning, we're going to be having a dialogue on what to expect when employees reconnect. And I am excited to have with me my dear friend, Bev Kaye. And I'll introduce Bev in just a minute. But first, I wanted to just cover a few things about what it means to have a dialogue here at Cylient. We really like to fully embody what it means to live and breathe coaching. And that to me means learning with and from each other. And that's why we do dialogues, where we give everyone who participates the opportunity to share your ideas, to ask questions, to also help us understand what your experience is with what we're discussing. And we know that in that way, we are able to learn with and from each other. So to help this work really smoothly, I'm going to ask if you could to come on camera so that we can see you. I'll also ask you to stay on mute unless there's something that we want to ask you about, and I ask you to unmute and share your thoughts and ideas with us. Periodically throughout the conversation with Bev, I'm going to ask you to contribute your ideas or share your thoughts on what she and I are talking about. And Beth LaValle with Cylient is producing for us today, and she's going to be watching that chat. She's going to be pulling out questions or observations and sharing that with us so we can bring all of us together in this dialogue. So thanks so much for being here. I'd love to introduce you to Bev Kaye, who for many of you may need no introduction at all, because Bev is truly an icon in the learning and development space. She has been helping people to understand how to guide others' careers and retain and engage people for many years. And in fact, she's received a Lifetime Achievement Award through ATD. I think what she's most famous for, though, is her fantastic book, Love 'Em or Lose 'Em, which was first published in 1999. And it's such a classic that it has been reissued 6 times, including the newest edition that came out, I believe, this year, and updated to help us understand how to really help to attract and retain people in this new pre or post-pandemic space that we find ourselves in. And now Bev works both as a sage on the stage, so still doing keynotes, sharing her ideas, as well as a guide on the side where she helps leaders think about how to attract and retain and engage their best employees. So Bev, welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here and to have a chance to work with a girlfriend. I love it.
I love it too. Bev and I talk all the time. We thought we might as well share what we're talking with, about with everybody. So, I thought a great place to begin, Bev, might be what actually attracted you into this space of helping people develop their careers and engaging and retaining them. What inspired you? Actually, before I get you to answer that, the one thing I wanted you to incorporate into this is this idea of love. I have to say, one of the things that blew me away about Bev when I first met her back in the early 2000s was that she had dared to call her book "Love 'Em or Lose 'Em." Now, I mean, people were not talking about love back in those days in a professional sense. So maybe let's begin there. Like how is it you came to call your book "Love 'Em or Lose 'Em," and how does that speak to who you are in this space?
I am lucky to have done the bulk of my book writing with a publisher, Barrett Culler. And the CEO of Barrett Culler believes that the entire book should be summed up in the title, not even the subtitle. So someone should see the title and say, got it. And I asked him, well, then why do I have to write the book? Let's just get a good title. and we struggled. They do a lot of testing of titles, but the Love 'Em or Lose 'Em, says it all. And we did fight for the word love. So the first edition was published 20 years ago. And then love was not spoken in the workplace. Now it is. And we fought for it because the word alone stood for so many other words.
Yeah.
Stood for respect them, stood for be good to them, it stood for all of that. And so I'm now in love with the word love, having just written the 6th edition.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that. And that speaks to so much about who you are and who I know you to be as someone who has just a great love and passion for people and engaging them, and also someone who's seen a lot. And so I thought I would ask you, this space that we find ourselves in, I think is so different than anything else we've ever been in before. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the stats about what's going on. We've just pulled a few of them. 2.9% of all American workers quit their jobs in August of 2021. A Microsoft survey of over 30,000 workers across 31 countries puts those considering to leave their job at 41%. 55% of working Americans say they're planning to look for a new job in the next 12 months. I don't think we've ever been in a space like this before. So I'm curious, I'm going to ask you, Bev, what you think is contributing to this incredible wave of change and resignation. But I'd also like to hear from those of you who are here participating with us. So feel free to answer that in the chat. What do you think is really making it different now in this point in time?
As you were talking, Dianna, I was thinking there's so many articles and so many statistics thrown out there that if leaders don't get the hint, warning, warning, what are you doing? Then it will just happen and they will be thrown off. So maybe what's good about all those stats being out there is that, someone's got a megaphone and we're saying to companies really around the world that this is a huge issue. And of course, every one of those articles talks about our time at home or our time, with different options in front of us has made everybody rethink their own options. Like the question, am I happy doing what I'm doing? Is this nurturing me?
Yeah.
Because if our work doesn't nurture us, we physically get sick. And boy, is that ever showing up in the burnout numbers. Absolutely.
Yeah. Beth, what are you seeing in the chat? I'm seeing a few people are adding a few things in. What are some of the observations people are making about what's different now?
A lot of people are saying that they've had some time to reflect on what's meaningful to them. And because of that, a lot of priorities have shifted, very similar to what Bev was saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And maybe, I was going to say, maybe the important question for any manager of any size group to ask is, what matters now? What matters most? What have you learned from this weird time warp we've all been in that tells you exactly what you really want from the work part of your life?
Yeah, no, I think that's an important question. And, I guess one thing I would point towards too, and I think is good for all of us to remember, because it's a very interesting time. I think setting that kind of intention that you're pointing towards, Bev, is so important, because I really believe that people are truly choosing again. That if you think about it, the real enemy for change is almost always status quo, right? It's
Mhm.
so difficult to leave what we're comfortable with, but that got erased.
Right.
We have been in this altered pandemic space for so long. That's no longer an option. We can't go back to where we were. And so, I think what we absolutely have to do is choose again. And I think this idea you're pointing towards of having, managers reflect on what's important and inviting others to do that too is really the space that we find ourselves in.
Right.
So
I was going to say, I see that Robin had a great, I'm going to use that, Robin. The great reflection leads to the great resignation. And maybe the flip of it is the great resignation, what are you now reflecting on?
Yeah.
And that's a question that, any leader, any manager can ask an individual, and we should ask each other. It doesn't have to come from a leader to us. It's us asking each other what we learned, what we're taking away from that whole experience.
Yeah, excellent idea. I mean, I love the idea that we're not in this alone, that we've all been reflecting. And, I think one of the points, one of the things we highlighted, if you happen to see the Cylient newsletter that led up to this, was an article that you wrote about the mindsets that people are coming back to the workplace with. And you talked about burning, churning, and yearning as just one way of looking at how people are feeling and thinking differently as they are re-engaging. So maybe I could ask you to just comment a little bit. I'm going to ask you, and I'm also going to ask everybody who's here to reflect on how is your mindset different now, than it was pre-pandemic. What's important to you now that maybe wasn't as important to you, or maybe you hadn't considered before we arrived in this space. So let me turn it back to you, Bev. What do you see in terms of mindset change?
Yeah, well, since everyone's talking about who's leaving, I wanted that particular article to say, well, who's coming back? And what are we going to do to welcome them back? And as I put it through my, I love to rhyme, I love alliteration. I thought we need to know some are thrilled to come back to the workplace and the workspace, and they're burning and they're excited about seeing their colleagues again and rolling up their sleeves in a different way. And if we don't know what they're burning to do, then shame on us. And maybe right there it is a great question. Like, what haven't you been able to do if you've been remote that you're anxious to get back to? I think that's one group that is looking forward to coming back to whatever the back was. The second group that's churning is not so sure. They're teetering on, do I want to go back or don't I want to go back? And I don't just mean back to the workplace. I mean back to how it used to be.
Right.
And what are those things you're most concerned about? And are we giving those people a chance to verbalize those concerns? And then the last one was yearning. And, my other big interest area over decades has been career. And I know, and I've always known, people will leave if they don't see career possibilities for themselves. And I think on the yearning side, maybe it's asking some critical career questions. What have you loved most in your career? And what would you love to avoid? Not that I can magically make it disappear, but knowing what you do not love doing should be helpful.
Yeah, many great points there. I love how you're really encouraging managers to actually ask the kinds of questions that help to explore how people are seeing the world differently and what really is different and valuable to them now. But that last point that you made, I think, is so important, which is, I think sometimes leaders or managers shy away from these questions because they believe they're supposed to have the answer. It's like, oh, if you say it, I'm supposed to be able to fix it, and I don't want to ask a question, if I don't have the answer to it. And so I guess one of the things that has also changed is maybe it's time to release our leaders from that expectation that they can fix or manage all of these things. And perhaps there's more, we're all in this together. We're all new. It's new for you, it's new for me. We're kind of co-creating what comes next and release ourselves from having to have necessarily answers.
And the paradigm change is that we need to ask more, and we need to ask the question, what can I do to keep you on my team? Because I don't want to lose you. And, I wrote a book on the stay interview, and it comes from that. And when most managers say, what can I do to keep you? It's at the exit interview, and it's usually too late. Yeah. I think that question has to be asked early and often.
Cool. Yeah, for sure. And I'm going to hold you on that one for just a sec, because I want to go look in the chat. We asked people some questions about how their worldview was different. And I think it's going to be really key to what you're talking about, which is if we're going to get them to stay, we need to first understand, kind of what's important to them and how have things shifted as they find themselves coming back into this new space. So Beth, you've had a chance to kind of look through what's going on in the chat. Are there themes you'd identify, or anyone you think you'd like to have comment?
Yeah, Donna Gilligan is saying, some are saying we're not in the great resignation, but instead we're in the great talent shift.
I love that.
I think it's interesting.
I love that.
And then we're also talking about kind of strength in numbers and how people that, now that many people are talking about this, or reflecting on their experiences, there's a safety net there of, my peers are talking about this. Now I'm allowed to ask and answer those tough questions too.
Yeah, what a great point. I think that because so many people are in this conversation, the conversation can now happen. I think these kinds of conversations maybe often happen before, a little behind the scenes or over the dinner table, but now we're having them for real in real time. And that's a huge shift for all of us. So thank you for those thoughts, folks. And I'd like to shift a little bit in terms of this conversation, Bev, and take it to the real practical. I mean, I think, one of the things you're best known for is practical advice on how to actually, have these conversations and step into these kinds of things. So what kinds of practical advice would you offer to, let's say, a leader who they've got a team coming back, maybe half of them are coming back, half of them are going to stay virtual, and the person's maybe not quite sure how to approach connecting and reconstituting a team? What thoughts would you have on sort of practical ideas for them to kind of address this? And I'm also going to turn it back to our participants and ask, what kind of practical situations would you like to either share thoughts on, like something you've seen work well, or do you have questions about, like, what do I do when? Let's kind of get this down to, in the moment kinds of dialogues and see what we can do.
And, I'm reminded I am going to send everyone an article on 26 ways to keep connected with your remote employees and with all your employees.
Oh,
and the idea of 26 builds from the Love 'Em or Lose 'Em book. That is our research on why people leave, and written according to the alphabet. But the big thing, I think, the A in it is ask. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we're asking enough questions, or we're not asking with an ability to listen to what that individual is saying matters to them.
Mhm.
And when I teach it, I see managers kind of pull back and say, well, if I ask my people what matters, what they want more of, I'm
Mhm.
afraid they're going to say dollars, that switch career-wise, that things I don't have control over and can't deliver. So I
Mhm.
think it's better not to ask.
Mm.
And what I believe in is, if you ask and they say something you can't deliver, tell the truth. I cannot deliver on that, but
Right.
I really want to keep you on my team with this organization. What else matters? And
Yeah.
I have promised people around the world, if you ask what else 4 times, you will get something that you can do something about. So
Yes.
maybe that's one really important question.
Mhm.
And we've got to make time for it,
Yeah.
uh, because our world is so busy, and it doesn't take a lot of time at all
To ask that question. Yeah,
to
for
ask that
sure.
question.
One thing I would add to that too, because you pointed to the fact that we ask questions, but if you don't actually listen to the response, you're not going to get the nugget that you're looking for. One of the
Mhm.
things that we talk about when we're teaching people in the moment coaching skills is the idea of actually tracking and listening to the emotion in the conversation. And I think it's really important as leaders ask these questions that they're listening for what's even unsaid in those conversations. What
Right.
what does that person maybe seem to be pointing towards? And as you're pointing towards, let's follow up with some additional questions that ask, well, what would that look like? Or how,
Right.
how would I know? Or what would that,
Right.
how would that show up for you to get some sense of really that,
Right.
how they're feeling about things. So,
Right. And it's taking a couple minutes, actually minutes here and there, and not a sit down, half-hour conversation about your goals, etc. It's I think you have to notice what's going on with your teams. And by notice, I have something I've talked about forever. It means recognize. Gee, Shannon, or gee, Linda, or gee, Amy, you don't look happy today. Recognize it just
mhm.
in your head, and then verbalize. So what's going on? I really want to hear why the excitement I see usually on your face isn't there.
Mhm.
And the third would be mobilize. Given what they said, what can you do about it? So
Mhm.
recognize, verbalize, mobilize. If we can keep those 3 steps in our brains, that will help.
That's great. So recognize, verbalize, and mobilize. Very practical. So those are great things to be thinking about in terms of how we engage folks. I was just taking a little peek at the chat, and one of the things I noticed, actually it's shifted. Maybe you can help me, Beth, but someone was pointing towards this idea of, the question about why. Certainly Simon Sinek and others are pointing towards, the why of our work and why we matter. In the context of kind of helping people re-engage, how might you help explore and understand and get to that why of, why people are here? Why do they show up? Why do they engage?
Right. And I think we have to come from pure curiosity,
Hmm.
curious about that sentence that person just spoke.
Mhm.
In the work I do, I'll just give you an image. I talk about, well, how do you get better at listening? And I talk about spotting the blinking word. And that out of a person's mouth, imagine comes a bubble, a speech bubble, and there are words in it. Ask about any one of those words that seem charged, that are blinking. And if you just do that, you are concentrating on what the person just said, and you're asking for more information. So you're going deeper not wider to the next question.
What a great
And-
image. I love that, the blinking word.
And there's always, and if it's the wrong word,
Mhm.
then they'll say, well, I didn't really mean problem. I meant something else, they'll tell you.
Okay.
And, you know, I see the question from Shavira. Are the reasons people leave varying depending on industry? And I think there's certain reasons for leaving across industry.
Mhm.
And what I'm hearing a lot, I just last week gave a keynote speech to people in healthcare, hospital administrators, etc. And they talked about the difficulty when nurses burn out, and that there's a compassion that's missing. And you do run out of compassion. And so I think it is different in different industries. In the IT industry, it is, are you keeping me on my toes as a professional? Are you helping me be my most employable? And so I think, yes, you have to listen hard to the differences in your teams and your people.
Yes, good point. And I think, thank you for that question about what's different in different industries, because I think it's really important to reflect upon, what the challenges of the world view. I mean, every industry has its own way of looking at the world, its own way of treating people, its own way of sort of assuming what the role of an employee is. And I think a lot of that is shifting. And I think you're seeing much bigger, kind of tidal shifts in organizations that, to your point, have not had as much compassion or empathy for the people who are serving, particularly people who are in service-oriented professions of any kind right now. So,
Right.
Yeah. So how do we shift our mindset to really honor that? I think it's a big question for all of us.
You know, Donna out there talked about the importance of course, inclusion, appreciation, engagement. And, Donna, I keying in on the word appreciation. And I think maybe we need many, many ways to appreciate people. And it only takes a few minutes. And one of the things I'm going to write down is I'm going to send you a list of 26 ways to show appreciation. And because I think a lot of leaders in the busyness and the overwhelming workload, don't see the moments that they can use just to appreciate specifically the work somebody has done. So I'm glad you used that word, Donna.
Well, Bev, why don't we take this moment to get a few of those? What are like maybe a top 3 or 4 of those that you think would be practical ideas that people could be using right now, and maybe give an example of like what might be going on and how could you appreciate someone in that moment? I think that could be valuable to all of us.
Right. And I think it's the little things. Like in my own office, I appreciate proactivity. And anytime one of my team does something that I never would have thought of that, then I want to tell them, even if it's a small, big, whatever, that they took the initiative. And I want to make sure I blow that up a little bit by appreciating.
Okay.
And the thing that doesn't help is when we don't name what it is. We might say, thank you, great job. But great job doing what? Great job in what part of what you just did? So the more specific that appreciation is, I think the better.
Yeah, for sure. I think that that people resonate most and learn the most when they get appreciated for things they do well. In fact, one of the things that we often share with people is that even appreciation and that acknowledgement can be almost a form of teaching, not only for the person who's doing this action, but also for others to see what works well.
Right.
I would sometimes say we do like digital learning of coaching skills, and sometimes people write really brilliant things. And what I love to do is actually go, that was beautiful what you just did, and here's why it really mattered. And I think when people hear both what they did and why it makes a difference, that is what kind of helps people see how they're making a difference. And that, I think, is one of the things that people are so hungry for right now. Certainly one of the themes that I hear the most out there is, having experienced what we've experienced for the last few years, I want to make sure that what I do is actually making a difference to make this world better in some way.
Right.
However they're making that contribution. So maybe we can shift to a little bit of that, because I think, coming back to the beginning of our conversation about what's different now and the idea that we're really choosing again. Personally, I think one of the most powerful things that we can do to help attract and keep our employees is give them a sense of purpose, not only individually, but collectively, that what we're doing is making a difference. And so I would put it out to our audience, what are you observing around this? Are you either personally being able to share how the work that you're doing or something about your work is making a difference for others? I would love to hear what your experience is with that. Or what's making a difference for you. I mean, what kind of difference you're wanting to make. And then let me turn it back to you, Bev, and ask, what are you seeing out there in the world in terms of people, either managers or even companies, using the sense of purpose as a way of attracting and keeping people?
Right. Purpose, my mind jumps to career, the work I do. And when I look at exit interviews, which I looked at, by the thousands when we first wrote Love 'Em, career, purpose in my career and what I'm doing and am I growing is critical. And I'll tell you, I found there are 5 things that individuals want from their leaders, whether they are a new recruit, someone who's been there for a while, etc. One is, do you see all my skills that I bring to this party? Not just the ones around this job that I have right now or I'm looking at. I have more skills than that. Do you know them? Secondly, will you give me ongoing feedback about how I'm doing? And when I do something well and when I skipped a beat. That's number 2. Number 3, they want to know, will you give me information about where our organization is going? And the desire for information came up in my work around COVID more than ever. I don't know if I'm getting the information I need. And that's critical. The 4th one would be, do I see multiple career paths for me? Do I see options? And I think now individuals know that up is not the only way. And they know that not everybody can move up that ladder, but they want to know that you're thinking about growing them. And lastly, it's their learning. It's their, will you keep me employable? If not here, employable by others. So I want those things. And when I feel heard, or when I'm asked questions about those 5 arenas, you've hooked me, because my career is so close to my heart, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all of those practices that you've just outlined are certainly going to help people feel heard and seen, and hopefully a part of something bigger that's happening in the world, which I think is part of what's really important to everybody right now. So thank you for that. I'd like to open it up. One of the things, we've invited people to send questions in advance, and we've got a few that I think we could turn to, but I also would invite people who are with us today, if the conversation so far has sparked a question, or there's something that you would like to ask Bev or me about, feel free to put that into the chat. And actually, maybe before we transition, is there anything in that chat right now that kind of wraps this final thought, Beth, before we kind of shift gears on people?
Natalie actually just put in here, I love that thought, Dianna, and we can't forget to appreciate our leaders, because they have a huge amount of pressure right now and so much is changing. So take a moment to express how the work they're doing is making a difference.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And don't be afraid to tell them, that some small thing they did meant a lot to you, because that's a great reinforcer. And so much of what we teach is, managers, here's how to take care of your people. I want to say, people, here's how to take care of your managers.
Yeah.
Because they are, and you're right, Beth, they are stressed more than ever.
Yeah. Interesting. Yes. Thank you, Natalie, for raising that really important point, which is, how do we kind of take care of each other in all of this? And yeah, we are all in this together. We are all co-creating this together. But I think it's a really good time to tune in and re-ask, how are we all doing together? Because this is truly a time when we can reimagine everything. To me, it's not just about keeping people, it's about keeping people and creating a space that they want to be in. In fact, maybe we'll take just a moment and then we can take some questions. But, Bev, you and I in our conversations, sort of getting ready for this, we're talking about this idea that it's not just about attracting people, but it's really about creating spaces that people feel attracted to and that they want to be in. And that's everybody, including the manager. If the manager, feels like they're just getting run down or run over by the whole situation, they're not going to stay either. So was there anything that you would add to this idea of how can we kind of collectively create spaces that attract and retain all of us? We all want to be together and working together. What are your thoughts around that?
I thought that Gigi made a great statement in her manager couldn't give her the dollars for her to take a particular coaching course, but instead made her schedule more flexible so she could build in other things. So to say, I can't deliver on that, but I can help in these ways, is something I think we shouldn't go to yes, no. We should always go to, well, what else could be done? What small thing could I do to say I hear you? So that's critical. And the other thing that I want to add in this, under the umbrella of the Great Resignation, is that when someone leaves, the more a manager can create an elegant exit, the more they will get a respectful return. So elegant exit, meaning, I want you to stay in touch. I'm sorry to lose you, because now what I'm seeing is a lot of boomerang employees knocking on the door saying the grass wasn't greener out there. In fact, it was AstroTurf. So what I had was great, the way it was. So are exits handled elegantly?
Mm.
Or
Yeah.
are they just, oh, well, there's plenty of talent out there?
Mm. Yeah, great point. I mean, like make it easy, for people to choose you again. Again, people are out exploring. And I love your point just prior to that of asking what's possible. And I think that's not just for individuals, but I think that's for all of us, like what is possible now in this new space that we're creating together. And I think using these conversations to help create that is an incredible opportunity for all of us to build spaces that really matter. So, excuse me, let's maybe take just if anyone's got specific questions that are there. I see one. How do the multi-generations play a part in how we recognize, communicate, and lead? Oh, great question, Robin. What are your thoughts on that, Bev? Multi-generations, we got a lot of generations
Right.
in the workplace right now. How does that contribute?
Yeah. And Robin, I'll just tell you personally, there's so much generation data out there that says how different they are. Where my mind goes is to how alike all of them are. I mean, I could name those, here's how they're alike factors. And maybe that's an easier way for a crazed, busy manager to work. Everybody wants respect. Everybody wants challenging job. Everyone wants to be noticed. And maybe with the different generations, it's just a touch different and how each of them want those same things. And maybe again, it's the A for ask. Ask your young millennials, name 3 things that I could do to make your work more enjoyable, to make your work more challenging, to make your work whatever. I don't think we ask enough because we're worried about the answers and that we can't deliver. And so we don't open that door. And I think open it and tell the truth if you can't deliver, again, and ask the what else question.
Absolutely. I think we've probably got time for one more question. Let's see. Is there I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. I think I would add to this. So one of the things that came up in the questioning that we had earlier was this whole idea of kind of hybrid and how do you actually do this in a hybrid workspace? Is there anything that's sort of different about being in a hybrid workspace versus being, having people in person that you think could be some good things for managers to keep in mind?
I think, I'm thinking about the number of talks I've done just recently where part of my audience is there and then part of them are on a screen. And what I notice about me is that I tend to look at the live bodies in front of me and I forget the screen. So however we do those meetings, if some are there and some are not, make sure your screen is close enough so you see their faces too and include them. And, it took me a while to get used to calling on people that were on the screen when I had live people around me. And it takes a special art, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. I think actually you're pointing towards a really important piece of the conversation, which is so much of what we're doing now is new to us, new to include people who are in different places, new to really be thinking about how people's, what we would call here at Cylient, their worldview has shifted, how to actually bring people together in ways that both honor what's individually important to them, while we collectively get things done. And it's a new space. It's a new way of thinking about employees for some people, certainly new ways of working. And I guess what I would point to is, rather than looking for all the right answers or the absolute how to, I think we're going to try things. I think we're going to then, taking a coaching approach to people and asking what's working, what's not, and just in true learning from each other fashion, we'll find a way to do this, as long as we're kind of not trying to put everybody back into a box they don't want to go back into, but really like reimagining a world without the boxes as much,
Right. Right.
that where there are greater connections. So I think this is a conversation that we're going to continue to be in for quite some time right now, as we continue to shape this new space that we're moving into. But it's an exciting time.
And Dianna, what I think is called for, to get ready for this, I was thumbing through piles of articles about the great resignation.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw words like, you have to value people, trust people, acknowledge people, etc. Those words are lovely words, but what managers need is the how.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I should trust. Yes, I should value. What do I do? And some of us in the HR world, it comes naturally.
Mm-hmm.
To many, many people in organizations who don't have that natural soft skill capacity. They need the how-tos.
Right.
And it requires teaching. Here's how you show trust. Has how you acknowledge. Here are words you can use, etc. And I think most of my work in all the decades has been in giving some how-tos and making them easy, so that a manager says, is that all there is? I could do that.
Yeah.
I could ask that question.
Yeah.
Etc.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's why your book, which I'll just give you a little plug, is another edition of it. Love them or lose, or love them or lose them. Sorry, that's not coming off my tongue today. Full of all kinds of practical advice, as is Bev. So I think we will put into the chat how you could connect with Bev if you need a guide on the side or a sage on the stage to help you think about these things differently.
I just want to say, Dianna, you have taught me so much about coaching skills. That Dianna and I have these wonderful regular chats, and she coaches me beautifully. And from how she coaches me, I get how to fine tune my own coaching. So, hats off to all the people you've taught.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Bev. It's always a pleasure to be in that conversation. And I guess I would close by saying we all need these skills right now. I mean, I think for us to really take advantage of this moment in time, it's really important that we all have the ability to take a coaching approach to our everyday conversations with each other, so we can learn together and take advantage of this exciting time to create something new. So know that here at Cylient, that's what we do. We help you instill coaching as a way of life in your organization. If you want to talk with me about that further, I would be happy to be in a coaching conversation to help you discover what that could look like for you. So please feel free to reach out. I think Beth's going to put some information into the chat for us. To all of you, I say thank you. Thank you, Bev, for taking the time to be in conversation today. Thank you, everyone who's here, either who wrote in questions or contributed questions today. I really appreciate how you've helped us to shape such a great dialogue, and I hope you're taking away a few nuggets that will be helpful to you. So with that, let me say thank you, and hopefully we'll see you again at another Dialogue with Dianna.